Next time, no one will find me. Victoria's own words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. D'Angelo. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will read to you a stipulation entered into by the parties. And it reads as follows: the state of Wisconsin by Deputy District Attorney Wendy W. Lemkiel and the defendant James Prokopovitz by Attorney John D'Angelo hereby stipulate: 1, the items of evidence in this case collected from the scene and from the witnesses, packaged, transported, submitted, and stored in a secure location at the Brown County Sheriff's Office without being changed or altered in a material way. 2, the surveillance videos, financial records, medical records, and cell phone records were properly authenticated by law enforcement, and the defendant freely, voluntarily waives the need for the state to call witness merely to testify to the authenticity of these pieces of evidence. Then the agreed facts agreed to by the parties. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, throughout the course of this trial, you hear references to Kathy M. Friday. Ms. Friday was convicted of perjury, conspiracy to commit perjury, and obstructing an officer in relation to this case. Ms. Friday subsequently committed suicide prior to sentencing in her case. As a result, Ms. Friday will not be called as a witness in this matter. Thank you. Mrs. Saunders, you ready to call your first witness in?
Your Honor, we do have a long witness. I know that the court referred to a morning break.
Well, I think it's too early for a break. We'll call the witness and then we'll stop at some point.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can have a minute.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would just request that any parties that are under the sequestration order that the exit the courtroom prior to any witness being called.
Yeah, and I except for those that are excused in the sequestration order I've designated before, I am granting the sequestration order, have granted it in the past. I am making a finding that the sequestration order is necessary in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call former Officer Christine Bilgo to the stand.
The witness, please remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. And will the witness please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
My name is Christine Bilgo, last name Bilgo.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Bilgo.
Morning.
Could you please repeat your full name for the record?
Christine Bilgo,
And how old are you?
52.
What'd you say?
52.
Okay. And are you presently employed?
I am not.
Okay. And were you previously employed?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you employed?
I was a deputy for the Brown County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. And when you indicate that you were a deputy for the Brown County Sheriff's Department, how long did you have that role?
For approximately 26 years.
Okay. And were you employed at a different law enforcement agency previous to that?
Yes, ma'am. I was a deputy in Vilas County for 3.5 years before that.
So you were in Vilas County, I'm sorry, how long?
About 3.5 years.
Okay. And if you could just speak, directly into there. It's a little hard. All right. So in total, between your years at the Vilas County Police and Brown County Sheriff's Department, how long were you a law enforcement officer?
About 28.5 years.
Okay. And with respect to you indicating you're a deputy, you mean like a law enforcement officer, a police officer?
Yes.
Okay. In the course of your duties as a law enforcement officer through those 28.5 years, did you have training and experience with respect to investigating criminal instances of conduct?
Yes, ma'am.
And on occasions, did those include allegations of obstructing or perjury?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they also include allegations relating to instances of physical assaults or domestic violence?
Yes, ma'am.
And had you assisted in homicide investigations?
Yes, ma'am.
With regard to your role, did you also have training and experience with respect to taking items of evidence into custody
Yes, ma'am.
and taking statements from alleged victims, witnesses, and suspects?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, so when we're talking about what your employment is to where you are today, did you recently retire?
I did.
Okay, and when did that occur?
But officially July 2020.
Okay, so a new retiree.
Yes.
All right. Now, with regard to when you were working with the Brown County Sheriff's Department back in 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, I'd like to direct your attention to Thursday, April 25th of 2013, into the morning of Friday, April 26th, 2013. Do you recall being dispatched to a residence on Coonish Road the morning, I guess it would be mid-afternoon, a little after 1 o'clock, in reference to a missing person?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's clear for the jury, with regard to your role as an officer in responding to a missing person inquiry, is that actually more common than people would think?
Yes.
Okay.
Many times we get missing persons calls for a teenager that's run away or just didn't communicate with their family or spouses. Maybe they had a disturbance or something and one of them took off and then they become worried.
And because the response from law enforcement to missing person cases many times has become routine, is there actually even like a form that you fill out if you respond to one of these instances?
Yes, we have a form for almost everything, but for a missing person, we have specific forms. You actually sign them saying that you're swearing that the things you're telling are the truth, and that especially like the most common, we have like our juveniles that go missing, and then the parents are signing it saying that they're saying the child is officially a runaway. So we enter these as documents.
So in the course of your employment as an officer, when you're responding in 2013 to this residence regarding a missing person, this wasn't the first time you were doing something like that?
No.
Okay. Now, you received a subpoena. You're here involving the case involving Victoria Prokopovitz. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with regard to that, I'm going to ask you a few questions. As you are responding to that Coonish Road residence, that is located in the town of Pittsfield, Brown County, Wisconsin.
Yes.
When you were responding there that day, did you go alone or what happened?
Our dispatch center, I was the section car working in that area, so I was called and dispatched to the residence. to speak to Mr. Prokopovitz. The dispatch center gives us a short narrative on the radio and just says that there's a missing person, and then they give a few details, and then there's more details in our computer. There's a little screen in our car. That area where I knew where I was going was wide open, and then on the edges there's trees and woods. It's very rural. And from the notes that the dispatch center gave me, that this woman may be suicidal. And I think that they initially said that, may have walked off. So it was April. Things are still pretty muddy and wet, and I think there's plowed fields around some of those areas at that time of year. I remember thinking that if this woman who's in her 60s had wandered off and possibly was suicidal, that she may, be fallen out in the field, be down in one of the ditches or something. And I wanted to make sure that if she was deceased, that we found her, because the notes in the call had said that the complainant had been looking for her for an hour already. And so it takes a little while to get to a call. So the half hour I'm driving there, I'm thinking, well, I don't want this poor family to find this poor woman if she's had an accident or killed herself. And it's a bigger area. So in our shifts.
Let me stop you right there. When you're describing a rural area, you've now described it as a bigger area. Would seeing the surveillance map or aerial view of that map assist you in the vastness of what you're describing?
Yes, ma'am. This house.
Now I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit Number 1. You made the reference to Coonish Road. Is this an aerial view map consistent with that area of Coonish?
Yes.
And as you're coming, or you're on Coonish Road, do you see the area where the house was then? Okay. And to be fair to you, you hadn't seen this map till right now,
No.
right? Okay. So with respect to the area here in this yellow sticky, does that appear consistent to the area that the house was?
Yes, the residence is on the north side of Coonish Road.
Okay. Now, and just so the record reflects, Your Honor, the witness is pointing to the middle of Exhibit Number 1. Everybody kind of see this? We'll bring an easel after the break. And so when you're describing the rural area out here, are there open fields and there aren't a lot of houses?
Correct.
Okay. And was this an area you were familiar with prior to responding to this area?
Yeah, I've patrolled in Brown County for 26 years, and I enjoy working in more rural sections, so yeah, I'm familiar with the area.
Okay.
The Mountain Bay Trail goes through to the north.
Well, if you could just show.
Through the north, to the north, running northwest.
Okay, and let the record reflect the witnesses used her finger and just trailed through the upper quadrant of it. Okay, so you indicated now you're driving there. You're alone in your spot, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're responding alone, and do you then arrive at this residence?
Yes. And then taking a look at the area, I'm not sure if I called when I was driving. But I knew we'd been thinking about that she could have wandered off or be down somewhere. I knew that it was getting late in the day and that I would probably need help looking for her if she was outside. And I knew that my best bet was to use a canine officer. And I knew Brooke County did not have any on at that time, so I actually called the Oneida canine officer on my phone and asked if he was free and if he could come assist me in searching for a woman. And
Now, when you're talking about that, calling in an assist, in your role as a law enforcement officer, is it common for various agencies in the Brown County area to assist each other in investigations?
yes, especially when we don't have services. So
Okay.
we usually only have at that time we only had our canines on, usually during the late afternoon or evening hours. So at 1:30 in the afternoon, there would not be a canine officer on. And knowing them, I knew that none lived in that area. And I knew one could not conveniently be called from their home.
So you were calling another officer from Oneida Police Department as your testimony for an assist.
Yes, ma'am.
When you're indicating you're familiar with canines, are you yourself married to a law enforcement officer who was also a canine?
He was a canine.
Okay.
But my husband, yes, I am married to Trevor Bilgo, who is also a deputy, and he was a canine officer for 8 years, which by marriage makes me a canine officer.
So you were familiar with the officer you were calling because he was also a colleague of your husband as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that officer you were calling for an assist on that date?
Officer Merlin Cornelius.
Okay. Now, at some point, you don't recall if you called him on the way or once you got there, but at some point you arrive at this residence.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was 5118 Coonish Road. Does that sound right?
Yes, ma'am.
Upon arrival, do you meet with anybody?
At the home, yes, I went to the house and I met with Mr. Prokopovitz.
Okay. At the time that you arrived at that residence, do you recall what that residence looked like in the outbuildings?
It was a small, I think, white house with several outbuildings.
Okay. Would looking at some photographs assist you?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Ms. Bilgo, you just looking at some photographs consistent with this residence would assist you in your testimony. I'm showing you, now you're arriving there Friday, the morning of the 26th, 1:11 p.m. is your dispatch?
The afternoon, yes.
Now, these pictures that had been photographed by your department May 2nd of 2013, just a couple days later, I'm going to ask you this for purposes of this area seeming consistent with what you saw. So I'm showing you what's been marked. Can you all hear me? I don't have a microphone. Okay. Showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 2. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And is that a photograph?
It looks like a photograph looking from Coonish Road to the north at the Prokopovitz residence
Okay.
and outbuildings, farm.
And on the left, what color is that house?
I think it's white.
And that's consistent with what you've already just described, the white house you referred to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm showing you it's been marked as State's Exhibit number 3. Do you recognize that?
One of the outbuildings to the east of the residence.
Okay. So kind of from the first picture, that's on the side, Exhibit number 3.
Yes.
Right. I'm showing you Exhibit number 4.
Exhibit number 4 looks to be standing in front of the residence, looking off to the east.
So is that the road in front of the residence?
Yes.
Okay. And with respect to what's there, other than that residence, there appears to be one other building, but it appears to be a vast field.
Yes.
I'm showing you Exhibit number 5. Do you recognize that?
It looks to be from east of the residence by about 300 feet, looking to the west past the residence,
Okay.
showing the fields on either side of the road.
So just kind of a more vast picture of 4. I'm showing you Exhibit number 6. Does that appear to be that same road?
Yes.
Again, these are all photographs.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm showing you Exhibit number 7.
And 7 looks to be just the field in the woods beyond to the east of the residence.
So right across the street. Or do you know?
It's not really,
Okay. So you recognize number 6.
yes, because the last outbuilding is here.
Yep.
And in this one, none of his outbuildings are in the picture anymore. There's some outbuildings from far, far behind it.
Okay.
So this just, to me, looks to be to the north and east, the large empty field to the north and east of the residence.
And the rest of the photographs, to be fair, these were taken by then your colleague. You didn't take these?
I didn't take them.
Okay. And I'm showing you Exhibit number 11. What is that?
It looks to be a picture of someone standing in, or a picture from the perspective of basically in the driveway of the residence, looking past the residence at the small white garage and towards the larger, one of the farm outbuildings that has a silo.
Still that Prokopovitz residence.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm showing you Exhibit number 12. What is that?
It is to the east of the residence. There's a small flower bed, some equipment or some other outbuildings, and then there's a burn barrel in the yard.
And that's still that same residence.
The same residence, just different angle, showing all the outbuildings and the more silos.
Now, when you're referring to the burn barrel in Exhibit number 12, where is that?
In the picture, I can point to it, but it's just to the east of the residence, just a little ways into the lawn off of the driveway.
Okay, so for it's clear to the jury, if you could take Exhibit number 12, can you point to where it is?
There's a large metal can, like a burn barrel, right here.
Okay. And not everybody knows what a burn barrel is. What's a burn barrel?
If you live in a rural area, people commonly burn their paper trash, boxes, bags, newspapers in a burn barrel.
Anything they want to burn.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm showing you Exhibit number 13. What is that?
It looks to be a closer picture of the blue pickup truck that's sitting in the driveway at the Prokopovitz residence.
And Exhibit number 15?
To the north and east by the residence. So there's a gravel driveway that goes into the north, and then it's a farm situation. So then there's driveways on the property that go in between the buildings. So this is a picture of one of the driveways, parts of the driveway that moves to the east on the property, and there's a large pile of pressure run or gravel near like a feed silo.
So the jury understands when you're describing this white house as you're pulling in the driveway, are there also some red outbuildings and silos?
Yes, several.
Okay, so this residence isn't just a little house on it. There are some other buildings?
No, there's significant amount of square footage to cover to look at. The residence is probably the smallest, one of the smaller buildings.
So as you're arriving, these are some of the buildings and things that you're seeing?
Yes.
All right. I'm showing you exhibit number 17. What is that?
So when I come in the driveway from Kunish Road to the north and then turn on that gravel area driveway between the farm buildings, this is where that gravel pile is, and then there's open front sheds here where like you can drive in a tractor and field and road beyond.
And I'm showing you exhibit number 18. And Your Honor, we intend to publish these to the jury, but I'm still marking them through her. Here's exhibit number 18. What is that?
Showing the field behind one of the larger other sheds. So the field in this case is got old corn stubble and things in it. Old corn stubble.
And I'm showing you it's been marked as State's Exhibit 19. What is that?
It looks to be a picture from straight on into one of the northeast sheds.
Is it common in your role in law enforcement that multiple pictures may be taken of the same thing from different vantage points?
Yes. Take pictures from different perspectives so you can see where things are exactly. And
I'm showing what's been marked as State's Exhibit 20. Do you recognize this?
yes, when I pulled up into the farm property, it was clear to me that like some demolition had been going on. There was.
So what is 20 a photograph of?
20 is a photograph of the west side of the residence, I think. Or no, I'm sorry.
Let me show you Exhibit 21. Does that assist you in your orientation?
Yes, thank you. So 21 is a better picture for me, so I can see that the road is to the south of the house, and this is behind the house and the garage, and behind that garage is this downed bunch of rubble and beams, and like they're taken down like part of a barn.
So let's back up. Then Exhibit 20 is a photograph of that.
Of that pile, so looking from north of the residence towards the back of the residence.
And now I'm showing you exhibit number 22. Do you recognize that?
And I believe this is the one open-ended shed that's to the north east of the residence. There's like some kind of tanker in one of the sheds, and then showing the large area of field behind.
Now, at the time, thank you very much. At the time that you are arriving at this residence, you indicated that, who did you speak with?
In the home, I spoke to Mr. Prokopovitz.
Okay. And when you're indicating Mr. Prokopovitz, I think you testified a little earlier, that's James Prokopovitz?
Yes.
Do you see the individual that you spoke with on that day here in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you briefly just point out where that individual is seated and what he is wearing?
He's seated at the defense table to my left. He's got a blue shirt on.
Do you have glasses?
No.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, James Prokopovitz.
Mr. DeAngelo?
No objection.
Then the record will reflect that. Thank you.
Now, at the time that you're arriving at the residence and meeting with Mr. Prokopovitz, where do you meet with him?
I spoke to him inside his residence.
Okay. So you did go inside the residence?
Yes.
Right. And at that time, were you the first responding officer, do you recall, or had others arrived?
I don't remember if the other guys were there yet, but
Okay. So when you arrive, you've already referred to the sheet that you would be filling out. Do you fill that out, or do you talk to him, or what do you do?
I always found it cold to like show up with a form in my hand when I go to talk to people, so I went and just talked to him first. But I know the forms, so I know the questions that are going to be on them.
Now, at the time that you are meeting with him, what does he tell you?
He told me, I asked him, what had happened, and he told me that he believed his wife to be suicidal and that she was missing. I asked, where she could be, or if she'd be with anyone, or if she could have taken a drive or gone anywhere. He told me that they didn't own a vehicle, and there was a truck out front, the blue truck, and he said that was his work truck. His employer owned that. He said that she commonly would go for long walks, and I asked if anybody else could have come and picked her up, or if she could have, called a relative or a friend, and he said that she really didn't speak to anybody and she really didn't have any friends.
Now, when you're talking to him about that vehicle that you just responded to, when you're asking him about access to a vehicle, he's essentially telling you she doesn't have access to one?
Correct.
Okay. And with regard to him making a reference to her being suicidal, was there an inquiry made about medication in the house?
Yes. I asked if she had any medication that she, would be taking. So it's a common question if someone's diabetic, and I know that they need medication. So I asked if she was taking any medication, and he said she was. And I asked if I could see it because he had said she was suicidal. I thought, well, first I want to make sure this is not an exigent situation where she could have taken an overdose of her medication. At that point, he told me that he did not allow her to have access to her medication anymore, as he said she had made a suicide attempt, he told me 5 years prior, by overdosing.
But he told you at that time that she did not have access to the medication, correct?
He told me that he keeps the medication and just doled it out to her as needed.
Okay.
And he showed me the bottles of medication, and they had the appropriate number of pills in them for.
Okay. So nothing noted as missing?
Correct.
And he didn't tell you there were any missing?
No.
And he told you he's the one who had access to them?
Yes, he told me prior to that, because of the previous suicide attempt, he kept the pills and did not let her have access to them at all.
At the time that you're meeting with him, when he's already raised something pursuant to suicide, did you also ask him about the presence of any weapons?
Yes.
Do you recall what he said to that?
He told me that I believe that his son had one weapon, but he had already checked, and he said I already checked and it was still in its usual spot. So at that time, I was kind of crossing things off my list that she could be using or doing harm to herself with in my mind. So there was no prescription medication of hers that she could be taking, and then no family weapons that she could have walked off with.
Now, based upon your training and experience, have you had experience with people who have been suicidal or attempted suicide?
Yes, ma'am.
In the case of a situation with respect to an overdose, would medications be an important component of that?
Yes. So
And now I'm seeing you're being told there's no access to that,
correct.
and there's none missing.
Correct.
With respect to a suicide, have you also responded where there would have been a weapon involved as a mechanism for suicide?
Yes.
And in this case, now as you're responding, you're being advised there's none available or missing.
Correct.
Now, at the time that you're speaking with Mr. Prokopovitz, do you talk to him about the last time that his wife is seen?
Yes.
And I guess I should back up. When he's identifying his wife, did he indicate what her name was?
Victoria.
Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
And what did he indicate with respect to when he last saw Victoria?
He told me that he had last talked to her 10 p.m. the night before.
And at that time, did he indicate what she was doing?
He said she was sitting in their living room watching TV and he was going to bed.
Okay. And he said that was the evening before on April 25th of 2013?
Correct.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, now is the time to take the morning recess. We seem to be segueing into another area. So if you would, everybody stand, please, and if you would go with Bailiff Tom. Thank you. And this will be for approximately. Thank you very much. Have a seat, everyone, and we'll get back together at 10:35. Thank you. Thank you. You can step down.